Hello, I'm Thomas Marsh. I'm a professional artist. In fact, I had my first professional commission nearly 50 years ago when I was 19. I'm primarily a sculptor, but I do a great deal of drawing and always have, and I've always done a great deal of painting. Today I want to talk to you about some aspects of basic drawing. In particular, I'm going to demonstrate how one draws a cylinder. But before doing that, I'd like to tell you a few things about the materials that you would have in your home that would make this lesson possible. I would assume that most of you can come up with a good old number 2 pencil with an eraser on the end of it. Perhaps even a conventional gum eraser. And perhaps a piece of sandpaper. And I know you can come up with computer printer paper. So with those materials, you could do a masterpiece. What I'd like to show you today will be some fundamentals of how one gets to that point in realistic drawing. And we'll focus on the cylinder. First of all, in basic drawing, there are 4 main you might say pillars or basic categories where we can study and gain skills. One is the area of proportion. Another is perspective. The third is light and shadow. And the fourth is composition. Composition is something that is an idea that cuts across all the arts, but most commonly we think of that visually, of course, in the arts of drawing and painting, sculpture, and photography. But it's everywhere. It's in architecture, it's in poetry, it's in string quartets, it's in dance, it's everywhere. So we will focus on the first 2, on proportion and perspective. First, we want to make sure that the pencil is sufficiently sharp. And how would you sharpen a pencil if you don't have a mechanical pencil sharpener? Take a piece of sandpaper, have it on a hard surface, and you basically rotate the pencil and sand away the wood until you have a very nice, sharp, conical point. In drawing a cylinder, one thing to think about is the concept of verticality. Because we're going to start with something very simple, and that is 2 vertical parallel lines. I urge students always who say they can't draw a straight line to not worry, because if you can draw a line that is more or less vertical, you can sketch it until it becomes clearly vertical and clearly straight. So you notice, I didn't draw those in a single stroke. I made several strokes, and we call that sketching. And it, in fact, relates very much to a more advanced idea in drawing, and that is spontaneity. You want to be able to have your arm move in some relationship to your subconscious mind. And it's very much akin to the now old-fashioned art of handwriting. It's very personal. When we start with these parallel lines, then we need to think of how are we going to turn this into a cylinder? Well, around everyone's home you have everyday objects that are cylinders. It could be a cornmeal box or an oatmeal box, a salt box. Many cylinders are in canned vegetables and soups and things like that. So I'm telling you this because I urge students to work from a model after they understand the concepts. So you won't lack for models. How do we turn this now into a cylinder? We have to think about the idea of what is the cross-section, or what is the top and the bottom of these objects. And that is a circle. When we see a circle in perspective, it becomes, or it appears to be, an ellipse. The top ellipse that you'll see on a cylinder, which is on a tabletop, and you're looking down on it, will appear narrower than the bottom ellipse. So we'll go through how to draw an ellipse. In doing so, you have to think of now the counterpart to vertical, and that is horizontal. We need a couple of horizontal axes. The axis of this top ellipse needs to work around a horizontal line. The axis of the bottom ellipse needs to work around a horizontal line. You notice I'm drawing these very lightly because eventually you'll erase those or partially erase them. An ellipse will look like a flattened circle. If you can imagine a circle that you could compress evenly, it becomes another term we use, of course, is an oval. You notice that the leading line, or the line of the edge closer to us, I've made darker. That is an effect that you can use to help enhance the three-dimensional look. Now the bottom one, of course, has its back edge hidden, but you can draw as though it is there very lightly. And then enhance that leading edge. Now, I'm going to step back from this, as one often should do when learning to draw and looking at their own work, and that is to see if you've had some kind of distortion by working from the side or from an angle. That happens more often than you might think because people will work on tabletops and look at it from the bottom, and that puts a perspective distortion on it. So always try to look at your work when possible, with your line of sight perpendicular to the page. So let me straighten these things out a little bit. I'm going to sketch some more, and I'm going to emphasize and darken these lines a bit. Notice that the bottom ellipse is wider than the upper ellipse. The reason for that has to do with perspective. Our eye level is very key to understanding perspective. When you're looking at an object like this cylinder, you will look at a certain level at the top and another level at the bottom. Your line of sight will therefore, it will seem to have a wider quality to the ellipse than at the bottom ellipse than the top ellipse. I'm going to readjust these axes just to make sure I have one of the key elements of drawing ellipses, and that is symmetry. You want to make sure that the top to bottom relationship and the side-to-side relationship is equal, a mirror image. Once you have completed the proportions to your satisfaction, then the last step is simply to come in and erase away some of your construction lines, these axes, the back edge to that ellipse. It doesn't have to be perfect either. These little construction lines, if they appear very faintly, sometimes are a charming part of the drawing. So it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. Finally, when you have successfully drawn a cylinder for the first time, think of what is necessary to get better and better at it. It's no different than if you were learning a musical instrument. Practice, practice, practice. That's the key. The next step in drawing a realistic cylinder will then be to learn how to work with light and shadow.